Good morning and welcome to your Hillsborough County MPO meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start off with a Pledge of Allegiance and invocation by our chaplain, Commissioner White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, I pray that you will guide this board, our staff, and our stakeholders as we make important planning decisions for our area this morning. Lord, as always, I pray for members of our armed forces and our first responders. I pray that you'll guide them, comfort them, and deliver them home safely each and every day. I ask for all of these blessings in your heavenly name. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner White. You should have received the minutes from the July 31st, 2018 meeting. I hope you've had a chance to review those. If so, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
There's a motion by Councilman Maniscalco, second by Ms. Stewart. Any further discussion? All those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Moving to public comment, I have one public comment speaker's card. Mr. Jim Davison.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jim Davison from New Tampa. I'm here today because the executive director of the MPO went before the Tampa City Council to explain what a 1-cent sales tax petition on the ballot in November would pay for in your MPO 2040 plan. It was presented incorrectly. The front page of the handout that I gave you are the amounts funding for each category in the petition and the MPO plan, including the math and how they compare. The comparison reveals both will raise $9 billion. All but two sections are underfunded in the petition categories as compared to the MPO categories in the 2040 plan. Section 11.04, bicycles and pedestrians only, is overfunded by $260 million compared to the MPO. That cannot be sent to build road capacity. There is no lettering in the petition that allows that to be changed. Section 11.08, the remaining transit funds, is overfunded by $810 million. What they did was they took the reserves, all of them that you had in the 2040 plan from the 1-cent sales tax, kept in reserve and consistencies, and stuck it into transit. There is no leeway. There is nothing. This will be the new 2045 plan if it passes. So, you can vet these numbers if you like. They're accurate. I can go outside with one of the staff and we can do it in 30 minutes and report back to you. But the bottom line is that they were not honest with the people. There is a bunch of confusion. She said that both subsections 4 and 5 would pay for road capacity improvements. The road capacity improvements are underfunded by $242 million. 1 out of every 4 roads in the MPO long-range plan has to be taken out. If you live south of Woodbury Road or east of I-75, you get 2 road widenings, period, from the sales tax money. That is a crime. And if you expect the people of Hillsborough County to pay for it, I think you're sadly mistaken. It doesn't also go into the performance of what it would do. The congestion is going to get about twice as bad than it is today. CO2 emissions are going to go up about 40 to 45% than they are today. Travel times are going to be twice as variable as they are today. And you don't have to do it because I gave you an alternate plan at the last meeting that can do everything this plan can do. The performances are almost identical and you don't have to raise taxes. Which one are you going to vote for? Raising your taxes 1%, hurting small business, or one that doesn't raise your taxes? There's even money in it for the school board. And that can be accommodated, and the school board can get almost everything they want. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, you know how to get me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the Commissioner White. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to see a staff response to this report. I'd like to make a motion that staff send the response in a memo to the board members and have it delivered to each board member by the end of September.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion. What's
Okay.
the report on?
I'm hesitant to use the term rebuttal, but a response, a staff response to what was just,
You mean to
just shown to us.
Are you talking about the presentation
The
that was made to the city council?
I'm talking about just
The
this
whole thing?
document that's in front of us this morning.
Oh,
Yeah,
that, oh.
That would seem to indicate that there might be some discrepancies in what was reported
Okay,
versus
yeah,
what these
I'll
numbers are
second that.
showing.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Commissioner White, second by Commissioner Murmas. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposers likewise. Motion is adopted. Committee reports. Ms. Torres.
Good morning, board members and Mr. Chair, Gina Torres, the MPO staff. I will give you your committee reports. The new appointments were recommended for membership on the Citizens Advisory Committee, T-BARTers, CAC, the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Boards. Those are in your consent agenda for approval. The other consent agenda, sending a comments to DOT on their West Bush Boulevard study was brought before committees, and it generated lots of discussion, and the motion was passed to approve transmitting the letter that's included in the attachment in your packet. For the action items, the committees approved and submit to you for approval the TIP roll forward amendment, approval of the resolution of support for West Shore Mobility Plan. The CAC did vote 7-5, but all the other committees voted unanimously to support it. And approval of the South Coast Greenway Connector was also unanimously approved by your committees. The Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board also approved the continued coordination contract with the Agency for Community Treatment Services. Other items discussed at committees: crash modification factors for complete street improvements, the North Alexander Street corridor land use and marketing study, the DOT's strategic intermodal system designation changes. These are primarily affecting streets in downtown Tampa. The DOT's 2045 cost feasible plan was just announced that the committees would be discussing that again in October with a consideration for a letter of comment. And the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee was very happy to learn that DOT is working to fill the sidewalk gap on the Courtney Campbell Causeway, which would lead to a complete path on the north side. Your policy committee discussed the 2018 Florida Transportation Earmarks veto list. This year, the earmarks can be absorbed by DOT using unallocated funds, but in the future, it's possible that projects might have to be removed from the work program to fund the earmarks, including possibly removing MPO priority projects. The TMA Leadership Group Facilitation Decision-Making members discussed creating a one MPO, one vote decision-making mechanism and establishing a rotating chair. Lastly, the T-BARTA MPO's Chairs Coordinating Committee staff directors transmitted the updated priority list for regional trails and the Transportation Regional Incentive Program to DOT District Office, along with the resolution supporting preservation of transit right-of-way in the I-4 corridor. These items were adopted at the July meeting of the CCC and Central Florida MPO Alliance. The MPO is leading the update of the priority list for major regional projects now that T-BARTA is focusing on transit only. Regional coordination on performance measure target setting was also discussed. So that's a summary of your committee items, but I have the online comments from the public that I can just move into now if you don't have questions. There were no Facebook comments. We had 4 people email, three emails from Mauricio Rosas concerning traffic that IKEA warehouse in Polk County might generate and that growth should not be promoted without considering mass transit. He also wrote an email asking to ensure that the Howard Franklin is equipped now for transit, not to be improved later. And he and Secretary Gwynn exchanged emails clarifying the Catalyst project, the use of dedicated lanes, and some funding issues. Sharon Calvert sent several emails she exchanged with Beth Alden on the comparison between the All for Transportation referendum and the funding scenarios for the MPO's 2045. I think that was just talked about now. And Heidi Ostrowski was concerned about traffic delays in the mornings at Gibsonton and I-75. And lastly, Tom Levitt, Brentwood Hills homeowners president, thanked me. I didn't plant this thank you email in here, but thanked me for a presentation on Vision Zero, and he wants to partner with us. We'll be holding a sign event out in his community. So those are your online comments.
Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell me more about the Courtney Campbell Causeway sidewalk gap and the FDOT is examining possible solutions for a complete path on the north side?
I'd love to. I don't have that kind of information, but we definitely have people here who can answer that. I didn't attend the BPAC meeting, so I can't answer with.
You could just send it to me if you
Oh,
want,
okay.
unless someone wants to answer it
I
now.
mean, it's probably something great. It's good news.
Okay,
So, I mean,
let's have it.
Thanks.
Stephen Benson, FDOT. There is a gap on the north side of the causeway that runs roughly between the airport and Rocky Point that was not connected for whatever reason when the Courtney Campbell Trail was originally built. And so we've been asked to see what it would take to be able to make that connection, acknowledging that there's a bridge structure in there and there's some seawall and possibly environmental impacts. So we're going to take a look at that and try to find a simple way, hopefully, to be able to make that connection. Otherwise, folks go all the way down, and there's a dead end. And there are instances where, it's been reported that folks are actually going out into the road to make that short gap. So we don't want that to happen anymore. So we're going to try to fill that gap. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. We're going to move the consent. Well, first and foremost, as you can see, Ms. Alden's not here today. She is attending a conference, if I'm not mistaken. Peer review. Okay, okay, and Mr. Claret is sitting in there for her. On the consent agenda, item B, the West Shore Boulevard Multimodal Safety Study Letter of comment was pulled by Councilman Vieira, and we're going to take that up after we have a vote on the committee appointments on the consent agenda. So is there a question, is there a motion to accept the committee appointments on the consent agenda? Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Councilman Cohen to accept A, committee appointments on the consent agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let them know by saying aye. Aye. Opposers likewise. Motion is adopted. We'll now take up the B, the West Bush Boulevard. Councilman Vera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. How's this?
There you go.
There you go. My apologies. No, I just wanted to commend Ms. Alden and this board and our express sentiment as it applies to Bush Boulevard. I'm glad to see that the MPO is continually getting behind a vision of more safety on Bush Boulevard. I've been working in order to get support from my Bush Boulevard community to see some of these developments continue to go forward, and I've been able to get support in a number of principles that I'll talk about just very briefly from some stakeholders on Bush Boulevard, including Mr. Stuart Clark, the CEO of Bush Gardens at Adventure Island, Mr. Mark Sharp of Innovation Place, Tracia Clossy of the Forest Hills Neighborhood Watch, Mr. Jim Wujek, President of the University Civic Association, and Mr. Mel Lone of Mel's Hot Dogs. And the things that these entities and stakeholders agree on, Mr. Chair, is a number of things: more pedestrian lighting, more high emphasis on pedestrian crossings like we see on Fletcher, and a lower speed limit, and just a better quality of life on Bush Boulevard. And the way that I see some of these suggestions by Ms. Alden in this correspondence, it's step one of a larger process that local government, state government, and if relevant, federal government have got to do in order to really have a better quality of life on Bush Boulevard. We know that between 2010 and 2016, there were 105 incapacitating and deadly crashes on East Bush Boulevard between Nebraska and 56th Street, according to our MPO, with 15 of them being deadly. We've continued to see deterioration on Bush Boulevard. I've seen it myself. I grew up in Temple Terrace. My mother still lives there. My grandparents lived there. My late father lived there. And we continue to see deterioration on Bush Boulevard. Just recently, as obviously the mayor of Temple Terrace knows, we saw the loss of the Kmart on Bush and 56th Street. And we continue to work to see development on Bush Boulevard. And I think that these suggestions by Ms. Alden truly go a long way. I often believe that there's nothing worse than wasted talent. And whenever I see Bush Boulevard, Mr. Chair, I see wasted opportunities as it applies to entrepreneurship, as it applies to business growth and economic growth. And I think that getting quality of life, beginning with a lower speed limit, beginning with more pedestrian-friendly features on Bush Boulevard, is one of the basic steps that we can do. We know that Bush Boulevard is a gateway to the city of Tampa for many people who come here to Busch Gardens, Adventure Island, etc. But presently, the way that it looks, Bush Boulevard really serves as a gateway to neglect. a gateway to lost opportunities and a gateway to missed opportunities. And I think that by pushing this forward, we can begin to really change that. So I just wanted to make this board aware of the tremendous community support that we have from some really established stakeholders in the community on these changes. And I would encourage us all in our individual capacities and our boards, et cetera, to push for these changes. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I know Ms. Stewart wants to make some comments also.
Thank Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councilman Vieira, for pulling this, because I was going to do exactly the same. The School Transportation Working Group under the MPO
Is your
has
mic on?
also...
Is your mic on?
Now it is. The School Transportation Working Group actually had a presentation of this actual study from FDOT, and we had concerns, so much so that the school district has also written their own letter to FDOT. And I just want to read you a portion of that because I think that you all got a copy, but during the fall of 2016, the School Transportation Working Group and this MPO passed on a funded road safety audit for Chamberlain High School because we knew that this was happening on Bush Boulevard. And so we want to ensure that Chamberlain High School, Adams Middle School, Forest Hills, and the other surrounding schools are included in the work that is being done on Bush Boulevard. You know as well as I do, if you drive that corridor at all, there are many, many students. Chamberlain High School ranks #1 in our top 10 most dangerous schools in this county. And we just want to assure that FDOT pays attention to that, that the lighting enhancements, creative ways that they can make that intersection in and around Adams Middle School and Forest Hills and that area, Chamberlain High School, safer. We had a death there last year. We've had multiple deaths over the last years there. We just want to make sure that the recommendations found in the proposals for West Boulevard are additionally, due to the proximity of Chamberlain, are considered in the work that they do. So thank you for that. You have the support of the school district on this. You have the support from my 3 surrounding principals who have been attending these meetings and offering their input to FDOT as they move forward on this project. So they have been engaged in the issues that they see that their students face every day. We have been out there. Vision Zero has been out there. Thank you, Gina Torres. The county has been as responsive and as they can be, as well as the city. William Porth has been amazing in and around schools, and especially in this area. Just this week, he told me about some suggestions for North Boulevard that he was going to propose. So I just wanted to go on the record and say that we really would like to see FDOT move forward on this project and consider the things that we passed on because we knew you were working on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Councilman Cohen, you recognize.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vieira, I wanted to just mention to you that at the policy committee at our last meeting, we had an exhaustive look at the study that was done supporting this, and we spent a great deal of time, those of us that were there, really drilling down into what the comments should be and taking the time to really get into the details because of the safety issues that you pointed out. And I just want you to know that we stand behind the recommendations. And the one thing I would say that we need from this board and from everybody here is everyone's work to get this done, because Bush Boulevard crosses so many different jurisdictions. We have, part of it's the county, part of it, of course, is the city of Temple Terrace, part of it's the city of Tampa, and each entity is going to have to do its part on the piece of the road that it is responsible for in order to make the whole thing flow. So that's all.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen. Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
Thank you. I'll make this quick, and thank you, Councilman Vieira, for bringing this forward. I do want to really give a big shout out to our Sheriff, Chad Cronister, because he has started a new program at specific hotspots around the county to educate people. They're passing out flyers to individuals at intersections, educating them about how to cross the street, because they stand at these intersections and people are still crossing the streets, not in the crosswalk. And you know, I really think he's a great partner in this, and I'll say there won't be enough money in the world to put enough stoplights or whatever is needed if people don't get educated about safety. That is so critical and so important. I know we're doing that through Vision Zero, but I really do applaud the sheriff for doing that. They're in 4 spots throughout the county. I know 2, one Sheldon and Hillsborough, Sheldon Waters is one. There's 3 others, but I think if we talk to them, maybe they'll do more of that in the other areas.
Any other comments? Let me thank each and every one of you for your comments. We all know about Bush Boulevard. I mean, each and every one of you tapped on something. Chamberlain High School, those students put their lives on the line every day. I ride there constantly, that's in my district, and see it constantly. But if you move east, Commissioner Merman is right. They've installed crosswalks. People don't use them. They do not use them. They cross the middle of the street in front of cars, and making it very dangerous. So DOT and Hillsborough County and City of Temple Terrace, I think we all need to work together hand in hand to make things happen there. Any further discussion? I hear a motion. You want to make the motion, sir, since you pulled it to vote on it?
Yes, sir. I hereby make the motion to pass the consent agenda item 5B under West Bush Boulevard.
Second. Ms. Stewart? Okay, second. We have a motion by Councilman Vieira, second by Ms. Stewart and Councilman Maniscalco. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. The roll call vote for the TIP roll forward amendment. There's been a revision. I'm going to call on Mr. Clarence to explain that.
Sure, thank you. Yes, we had some late information regarding one of the amendments in your packet, and we've revised the write-up accordingly. So amendment number 27, which was part of the series of the roll forward amendment projects, is not going to be recommended to go forward. It's not necessary to amend that project, so we would respectfully ask that you delete that from the list of roll forward projects.
Okay, but I have a motion to accept the TIP roll forward amendment as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Cohen, second by Commissioner Merman. We have to have a roll call vote.
Excuse me. Good morning. Klug?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Mechanic? Yes. Gerarda?
Yes.
Cohen?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Hagan?
Yes.
Lapana?
Yes.
Lott? Miller?
Yes.
Vieira?
Yes.
Merman?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Wagner? White?
Yes.
Stewart? Motion carried.
Thank you. Now moving to action items. West Tampa multimodal plan. Chris Keller. Morning.
Good morning. Yep. Thank you. Chris Keller, Tyndall Oliver. Today I'm going to give you guys an overview of what is the City of Tampa Walk Bike Plan Phase 6, better known as the West Tampa Multimodal Plan. So as I mentioned, this is Phase 6 of the Walk Bike Plan. Some of the earlier phases of the Walk Bike Plans looked at the West Tampa area and looked at improvements, which we've defined as Lewis Avenue to the west, North Boulevard to the east, Columbus to the north, and Gray Street to the south. But a lot of those improvements dealt with how do you get people through West Tampa? How do you get them through and into West Shore? How do you get them through and into downtown? One of the things we wanted to look at with this one is more focus on how do people within our West Tampa study area get around West Tampa and for some additional connections to those other centers, but really focus more on West Tampa as a whole. So as with many plans and studies, the first thing we did was to identify the existing conditions to develop our inventory. There's been a lot of planning efforts, so truly trying to understand what has already happened. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we want to establish a good base to move off of. So getting into our recommendations and into our safety and mobility enhancements, we looked at it in 2 ways. One, there's systemic enhancements, and then 2, site-specific enhancements. Our systemic enhancements are things like making sure there are complete sidewalks, especially along major roads, dealing with drainage issues, lighting, especially at intersections and crosswalks. Are there additional crosswalk opportunities? traffic calming and speed management. Those general sort of basic things that we talk about when we talk about walkability and bikeability, and really encouraging, and a lot of this stuff has already been set in action in our plans, but really encouraging that to move forward. Now, when we get into our site-specific enhancements, we looked at a couple different things. We looked at trail connections, complete street opportunities, and some opportunities for some neighborhood greenways or bicycle boulevards. So one of the first things we did was to look at how can we complete what is the I-275 Greenway. It may be a little hard to see on your screens, but there's some green lines there. There's some existing pieces of what is this I-275 Greenway that are there. How can we make that connection through West Tampa? And why do we want to do this? One, it's been identified regionally and statewide as a priority connection. The next presentation, it'll connect to that with the South Coast Greenway as well. But it also provides more local connections to the Courtney Campbell. We talked about the sidewalk completion there. To West Shore as a whole, to the new Midtown redevelopment, to downtown, the Riverwalk, Julian B. Lane Park, and points beyond east and west. So how do we make that connection? The study, we identified 4 potential alternatives. First alternative, really look to utilize the existing right-of-way on the south side of the interstate and push the trail connection through there, and utilizing so that right-of-way and then some portions of LaSalle Street to make that connection from Himes Avenue over to North Boulevard, and then getting into downtown from there. The next alternative, very similar, utilizing the right-of-way in LaSalle Street up to Rome Avenue, then taking advantage of some improvements the City of Tampa has planned for Rome, and also looking at the opportunity for a trail along the side of Rome Avenue to connect down to Cass Street where the extended green spine is planned to go. And that would provide that connection into downtown and over to Ybor and further to the east. A third alternative, more conceptual, is one that, again, utilizes portions of the right-of-way of the interstate, but then if there were a future opportunity to provide a connection from where the green spine is currently planned to end at Howard Avenue and connect through north of the JCC and in between the JCC and the Armory over to Armenia, could you provide a connection via sort of a cycle track on Armenia to get to Cass Street and to that green spine and be able to make that east-west connection there? And then our fourth alternative that we looked at, we wanted to look at sort of a northern alternative. Everything we looked at before was on the south side of the interstate. Are there opportunities to take the trail in this facility to north? So we looked at an opportunity to go north and along Main Street, and the potential for some sort of trail connection down the middle of Main Street, similar to what the Pinellas Trail does through parts of Tarpon Springs and other parts of Pinellas County. Next, we looked at some complete street opportunities through West Tampa. First one was Main Street, so from McDill Avenue over to North Boulevard. And generally here we looked at how can we better define the roadway. Main Street is a main street by name, but also by the way that it actually operates and feels. How can we better highlight Main Street as a main street? One, there's 40 feet of pavement out there. It has a really fast and wide feeling. So how can we better delineate? How can we better define that pavement that's there? Can we do some intersection enhancements to improve crossings, help slow down, manage traffic? Are there opportunities for neighborhood traffic circles? There's volumes and speeds are relatively low on this street, so could we do shared lane markings, lighting, and enhanced crosswalks? So, and just a quick example of how the image on the left, the existing, and how by defining some on-street parking, providing those shared lane markings, some bulb outs, could better define the roadway itself. The next corridor we looked at was Columbus Drive, and we went here from Lois Avenue to North Boulevard. Again, you'll see some similar type of treatments that we looked at, enhanced crossings, lighting, particularly intersection lighting. There's some intersection enhancements. There's, for example, like at McDill Avenue, there's permissive only left turn lanes. So if you're trying to make a left, you never get protected phase. Operationally, could be introduced sort of a protected permissive phase with a flashing yellow arrow there to help with those turning movements. Wider sidewalks, especially to the west side of the corridor, where Columbus Drive is a very big, large, fast road with a lot of traffic on it. And then something that was first identified in phase 1 of the walk-bike plans as a go look at it in the future a little more, and that's what we did here, but the potential for lane elimination or a road diet on Columbus between Rome Avenue and North Boulevard. And I'll talk about that briefly in a second, but one of the things, I talked about wider sidewalks. One of the challenges out here just west of McDill Avenue on the south side of Columbus by the cemetery is that the current sidewalk there is at best 3 feet wide. So one of the things we wanted to look at, is there an opportunity to provide at least a minimum 5-foot sidewalk, an accessible pathway through here? Widening to the south because of the cemetery isn't feasible. So we looked at, what is the existing pavement width, what are the existing lane widths out there. At 12-foot lane widths, we thought that if we could take a foot from each lane, go down to 11-foot lanes, wide lanes, that we have 4 extra feet to give to the sidewalk on the south side. So moving that curb out, creating a 7-foot sidewalk, a 7-foot pathway for pedestrians to be able to cross or to be able to walk along this section of Columbus Drive. I talked about the potential for a road diet. To the east of North Boulevard, Columbus Drive is a 2-lane undivided road. To the west, it is a 4-lane road today, but traffic volumes between Rome and North Boulevard are significantly lower than they are west of Rome Avenue. Also, the current width out there of Columbus Drive is very narrow. At parts, we have about 9-foot travel lanes out there, which are very tight. They're pedestrian facilities. You can see on the picture on the right, you have utility poles in the middle of the sidewalk that make it very hard to travel through. There's not enough room for bike facilities out there. Doing something like a road diet out here would provide a little bit extra room to provide some of those extra facilities and to address some of these walking and biking challenges that are out there. It also gives us an opportunity to do some enhancements at the intersection of Rome Avenue and Columbus Drive. We looked at potential for a signalized intersection and a roundabout at that location. And then Howard and Armenia. Again, it's a one-way pair, especially Armenia Avenue it has a lot of pavement out there, high speeds. So looking at things like intersection bulb outs and bulb outs along the corridor to help define the on-street parking area, help with speed management, enhancing the crosswalks that are out there, lighting, and then what opportunities are there to provide bicycle facilities. North of Columbus, the county, through the last resurfacing project, provided buffer bicycle lanes in coordination with the city. Are there any opportunities to continue that as we move south into our study area? And then lastly, we looked at neighborhood greenways. These are often called bicycle boulevards or neighborhood bikeways or bikeways. But the idea is, how can we take sort of more localized local streets and give bicyclists a little bit more priority through things like pavement markings, signage, and traffic calming. So the first one we looked at was Gray Street. In this one, we actually went from West Shore over to Rome Avenue. One of the unique things about Gray Street, it already has a signalized intersection at West Shore Boulevard and Dale Mabry Highway, and is kind of informally already used as a neighborhood greenway today. So the recommendations here are really pavement markings, some intersection enhancements to help people get across intersections such as McDill Avenue, Howard and Armenia, and really sort of highlighting the street as a bicycle priority, pedestrian-friendly street. One thing with Gray Street, it kind of lands in between the interstate and Kennedy Boulevard, so it provides that middle east-west connection through the south part of our study area. Looking to the north end of the interstate, we looked at Beach Street. Again, similar to Gray Street, already kind of informally used as a bicycle route, east-west. Intersection enhancements, pavement markings, signage to really highlight Beach Street as that priority bicycle route through West Tampa. As part of our study, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but we did perform a feasibility review to identify fatal flaws and really call out any obvious challenges to move some of these projects forward. We don't want to recommend things that are obvious that they cannot be constructed. We wanted to develop some sort of baseline planning, what are the costs going in here. So, the costs could vary once you get into design and engineering and construction, but, we want to give an idea of what it would cost to implement some of these funding or some of these recommendations. And then next steps. Our plan may be ending, but we really see this as the beginning of the conversation. So the next steps are that continued outreach, that continued coordination with the neighborhoods and communities of West Tampa, and then that continued coordination with the agencies that implement these strategies. So with the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and FDOT to make sure that these recommendations get scoped, funded, and constructed. With that, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
That was a lot.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. West Tampa has been neglected since Eisenhower was president. And I say that because that's when the interstate was built and came through. Oh, but I'm a history nerd. But I'm glad that you brought up certain areas within West Tampa and within my district, mainly Columbus Drive. Columbus Drive, I've always called it the gateway to our heritage. And what does that mean? That means you come off the airport down Spruce and Boy Scout, and you get to Columbus Drive, and as you cross over Dale Mabry, you go into basically the Latin district. You cut through West Tampa. As you continue down Columbus Drive, you go to Ybor City. And Ybor City is really the foundation of the city, so it's so important. And it needs to be repaved. There have been some improvements over the years, such as Himes and Columbus with the crosswalks with that red brick pattern. Of course, the stadium is up the street. The Yankees complex is up the street. But beyond that, it's been forgotten. I live in West Tampa near Raymond James Stadium, and I've thought, I want to ride my bike from home to the Riverwalk. How do I get there without getting killed? Crossing Martin Luther King, I have to go over the bridge. That's difficult. Crossing Columbus Drive, you showed the picture. Look how narrow it is. I would have to take my bike and walk it across the bridge. You've discussed specific improvements like a road diet, which could help. Rome and Columbus is very dangerous. If you're going north on Rome to take a left on Columbus, you can't really see who's going over the bridge. I think you showed, is it a possible roundabout or is it a street light?
We looked at both alternatives.
Okay.
So one more, the traffic signal is a shorter term recommendation. The roundabout would need a little bit more evaluation and looked at, but we think it's feasible within there.
No, but I'm glad that you brought it up because it's very dangerous and it needs to be done. Also, Armenia and Howard are one-way streets south of Tampa Bay Boulevard. Back in the day, the city limits stopped at Tampa Bay Boulevard, and I think that was maybe the last time those were two-way streets, if they were ever two-way streets, especially when Howard goes north of Columbus and winds around where the Marina Club is at. It's a very dangerous area. I remember 2 years ago, on a Sunday afternoon, it was a beautiful, perfect day. I remember this. And I saw a lady, literally right after it happened, get killed crossing Howard Avenue because it's a racetrack. People go north of Columbus, coming around. There are no crosswalks. She was crossing the street just to see. I think she was looking at construction, see what was happening in this house across the way, and she was killed. But people, it's crazy. I've noticed that, of course, Armenia and Howard is an exit for the interstate. Of course, that's what I'm assuming created those one-way streets north and south. But, we need to do something. We talk about pedestrian safety and whatnot, and I'm glad that you touched on points that I've been thinking about for years. And I hope we can move forward on these improvements. The district needs it. Like I said, West Tampa has been neglected for 60 years, and this would be a huge improvement to the area. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. It was very, I couldn't agree more, Councilman Maniscalco. It's great to see all of these ideas coming up and attention paid to West Tampa. I think it's one of the most lovely places in Hillsborough County, the historic streets, Howard and Armenia, and talk about opportunities for economic development, for quality of life, for a walkable community. I think West Tampa is a ground zero in a lot of ways. Really wonderful opportunities there. I have a lot of questions about some of this moving forward. And one is, I'm always concerned, at least right now, when I see I love the greenways and I want to see the greenways happen. But when I see them close to the highway, because of some of the latest watershed studies on pulmonary disease, and when I think about exercise, close to cars that are spewing, I've seen that if you live close to one, you're at much greater risk of cardiopulmonary disease. And to me, to put the trailways near the large roadways is not a wise thing, and I wonder if that's any factor in consideration of where they're placed.
Yeah, I mean, we do recognize that it's probably not the most enjoyable place, and from a health and quality of air standpoint, being next to an interstate might not be the best opportunity. But when we looked at it, there's very limited right of way to provide a trail through here. And I think we've got a lot of options for things like the neighborhood greenways and bicycle boulevards and more localized mobility enhancements. But to provide a 10 to 12-foot trail, this is a really challenging area. So, I mean, we kind of looked at what opportunities can we fit one in and kind of make the best of the room that we have.
I just think that should be a consideration. It'll be less of a consideration, I believe, in decades to come when we have all electric vehicles, which I think are coming pretty fast. But there's also, of course, the noise factor there too. The noise walls help some of it, but there's still, it's heavier noise. And, you know, in terms of not just enjoyment, but safety, being able to hear what is around you in your environment, I think is also a consideration. So I'd just like to put that out. Some of the others, things that I've thought about, one is I've always been a proponent and talked about, because I think these streets turn into drag ways when they're one way. And it doesn't look like this took any of that into consideration, but that's, I think, another way that we can look at. There's the street diets, there's the one-ways that really kill economic development and I think hurt the neighborhoods.
For the one-way pairs, we did not look at like a two-way conversion through here, but we did look at how can we address some of the speed issues, narrowing the travel lanes that are out there. Like I said, Armenia today has like 15 to 20-foot travel lanes. You could fit 2 to 3 cars within one travel lane in parts of Armenia. So can we narrow that? Things like the bulb outs and curb extensions out there to try to provide more of that physical vertical barrier. You know, providing, you know, sort of bicycle facilities out there to help narrow. And similar when I said about Main Street that you've got a wide roadway, how can you better delineate the space out there to make it feel, without changing curb to curb, how can you make it feel narrower and encourage people to drive slow? We looked at opportunities to do that within this. Check volumes and stuff within our study, really couldn't quite get into looking at, you know, two-way conversions and other stuff, but that's not necessarily something that can be looked at in the future, but we want to do, with keeping the roads operating as they are today, how can we better manage those speeds? The additional crossing opportunities can help with that. There's potential for not just pedestrian crossings, but introduction of new traffic signals to help with that circulation around the one-way pairs so that people don't have to go as far out of their way, or if they don't want to cut through or don't know to cut through a local street, they see a signalized intersection may encourage them, so that from a driver's standpoint of being able to get around the block, it may seem shorter. So we kind of try to touch on that some within the scope of what we were trying to accomplish with it.
I realize you can't do everything. I'm just bringing up some concerns that I have that I think impact the way that this all happens. And some of the other, I always find this is a black hole of jurisdiction that concerns me. And we're here talking about a multimodal study. But one of the things I see is that there's no, from the city, the county, from anything, there doesn't seem to be anyone who has jurisdiction over things like bus cutouts and how we get the bus through neighborhoods. And it's a problem here. I expect in the future, no matter what happens, that we will have more transit service. And, you know, the fact that, and I brought this up before, at 15th and Hillsborough, we have a big empty Walmart parking lot, and yet we have a really teeny little skinny bus station there, which a lot of people use, or bus stop, I should say. And I heard it had to be skinny because there wasn't any room, but we had this big open parking lot, and we had opportunity when Walmart was built, and maybe even today, to do more, but that doesn't seem to be anyone's responsibility.
I agree that there are jurisdictional challenges, and West Tampa is not unique in that. I mean, you know, like Howard and Armenia, Columbus Drive, they're county maintained roads that run through the city of Tampa. So there's this coordination. That's why I said that continued coordination is really key point to getting some of these recommendations move forward. Some of the issues you brought up, I mean, I think there's some of the systemic improvements and through just continued conversation with boards like you guys and that push between the agencies to continue to work on those jurisdictional challenges.
And I think the same thing exists, jurisdictional challenges in terms of the utility poles all over the city and county and everywhere, we have utility poles in the middle of narrow sidewalks, which obviously are a safety hazard, impede people getting through. And is there any coordinated program or anything like that to be looking at that along with TICO?
Are we still talking about West Tampa?
Yeah,
Okay.
we just saw it in the pictures.
But you said it throughout. Go ahead. Ask the question.
Off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any actual established programs. I know through like resurfacing projects and other projects, they look at opportunities to relocate when possible, especially if they're located in the middle of the sidewalk, to at least move them to the back. But as far as like an established program, I'm not aware of.
And I'll just say my final concern, and I think we're going to learn more about this coming up, but one of the plans in the next phase in the Tampa Bay Next is I look at, and I've got a real concern about the express lane drop-off at North Boulevard, and because North Boulevard, I think, is a really wonderful street, walkable, and so I know as we're moving forward, we'll be looking at the way that that coordinates, but it's been brought up here this morning as one of a prime West Tampa street, so I just have concerns. I don't want that to be turned into some of the other streets, as an expressway connection.
Yeah, agree, and again, that continued, I think the coordination and continuing the conversation. Like I said, this isn't really the end of the conversation here. The way I view it, it's sort of the beginning, and continuing that conversation to make sure that pedestrians and bicyclists and just general mobility and safety are included in all of our projects.
And again, it's a great job. As we move forward, because I know this is the first step, but that we start, comprehensively being able to look at hopefully all of these impacts and how they connect with everything else. Thank you.
Any further discussion? You've heard the plan. I'm sorry. Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for your report. I had some questions, though, about one of the first images you put up on the screen, which showed the sort of the boundaries for this study. Now, I understand that this was primarily focused on West Tampa, but your sort of study area boundaries extended to the west beyond all the way to Lois. And of course, once you cross Del Mabry, you're in the West Shore district. And my first question has to do with if you stop the study boundaries at Lois, you're less than a quarter of a mile. You're 2.5 blocks from a proposed multimodal facility. And one of your first objectives talks about connectivity with existing and planned future facilities, let's say. So I'm just wondering why did you stop it there? And go ahead, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, and we so this is West Tampa. It's not necessarily defined by like the CRA or the historic West Tampa. We sort of that central area, so West Tampa and beyond. When we first looked at it, we kind of looked at Dale Mabry, but we wanted to make sure that we included sort of we wanted to go a little further west in Dale Mabry, so Lois was sort of that next logical terminus up here. When we looked at additional connections, a lot of, especially walk bike plan phase 1 and phase 2, looked at some additional enhancements, especially from Dale Mabry to the west, that would be able to connect into the future intermodal facility. Also with a previous study that I was involved with about 1.5 years ago, when we looked at the potential for improvements on Spruce Street and a pedestrian trail overpass on Dale Mabry. We looked at some of those additional connections as well. So that's kind of included in that background information. I just sort of give you the highlights of some of the additional stuff that was included into the study.
And just to follow up on something Commissioner Kemp brought up, relative to, let's say, coordination with other studies or other proposed projects, and she brought up the issue of the potential transit stop at North Boulevard, of course. But again, on the other end, on the west end, in the West Shore area, there's a proposed major multimodal hub. But there's also an effort that the West Shore Alliance undertook about 5 years ago that I was involved with that dealt with the public realm. and you're coming sort of right up to the doorstep, and you're sort of stopping, not even acknowledging that there's another opportunity to coordinate.
And maybe I missed that in the presentation today. I think the study kind of covers a lot of that. We do have kind of an extensive background that does talk about the West Shore plan, not just the past one, but the one that they're currently been working on. The CRA has a strategic master plan that they've just wrapped up, and we feel like everything that we've sort of thrown out there as suggestions and recommendations are really sort of in harmony with those plans and don't really contradict, and kind of play in nicely with all of those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, what's your pleasure? Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Commissioner Kemp to accept the West Tampa multimodal plan. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now move to the South Coast Greenway Connection Feasibility Study. Wyatt Bowers. Morning.
Morning. Okay, we'll do it that way. Morning, Wyatt Bowers with Atkins. We're consultant for the Hillsborough MPO, and here to talk today about the South Coast Greenway Trail Alignment Study. South Coast Greenway is part of the larger Gulf Coast Trail, which many of you know probably is prioritized through Sun Trail as the number 3 statewide corridor. There are portions of the trail that are already coming online, and there's work that the county has been advancing for several years, including building the portion from Shell Point to 19th Avenue in fiscal year 2021, as well as there's a PD&E study that's recently been advertised for Phase 3 segment, which just brings it up to Sims. And then there's also the replacement of the Maydell Bridge, which includes a 10-foot wide trail on the side of the bridge to be reconstructed in the next couple of years. So this study is to look at how we can connect the South Coast Greenway Trail south of Sims with the Tampa Bypass Canal, and then set up through with the Green Spine and all the other things that we were just talking about. Completing major components of the Greenway system through the county. And what we focused on was the northern connection at Maydell Bridge, down to the utility tract at Sims Road, and then also noting that this would connect with the Selman Greenway and so on. Providing additional mobility options for some of the communities in the area, and in order for it to be eligible for Sun Trail funds, and again, this is part of that Sun Trail network, the general premise is that you need a 12-foot multi-use off-road path. So that is what we were looking to delineate. Our task was to look at different alignments, do an evaluation, go out to the public and the community, and come back and then do some conceptual alignment analysis and cost estimating. We held 2 meetings in early April. We sent out about over 10,000 of these little postcard flyers. Got pretty good attendance at the 2 meetings. There was an additional meeting held in June at the request of the county for getting a little bit more detail regarding one of our alignments, and I'll go into that in just a minute. What we asked people at the meeting, we gave them some images, for example, of trails that were along a major road, trails that were along a power line, trails that might have been along a creek, and trails that were along a local smaller road. None of those images were from Tampa, Hillsborough County, so that they didn't mix and match into their perception of something. And just to ask people where they would generally prefer to see a trail. And you can see that division in the pie chart. We also asked about amenities and what were the important things that they'd like to see on the trail. Overpasses over major roads came out pretty high, as did some of the amenities like benches and water fountains and lighting. So as we started getting into the trail study, we actually divided it. It's 8 miles north to south. Our trail actually meanders a little bit, so it ends up being closer to 11, which you'll see in a minute. But we looked at dividing it into 3 different sectors or segments, the northern section, the central section, and then the southern section. And a lot of the detail alignment differences happen in the north, so we'll just dive right into the north. What you see in the table to the left is the evaluation criteria and matrix that we developed with different things that we were looking at to try and hopefully score the different alignments against each other. We were looking for, does the alignment, provide access to public transportation? Does it enhance access to healthy food, providing connectivity to schools, parks, public facilities? How is it from a trail aesthetic comfort standpoint? And then how about property ownership, potential right-of-way? And we also looked at environmental justice and the amount of population density or people that we could be served. The three alignments that you see on the map, we called N1 is kind of following Maydell Drive, which is an old historic trail actually area. N2 is a canal that's a Hillsborough County drainage easement area. And then N3 follows the TECO power line on the east. This was added, N3 was added during the study as a result of some discussions with the county. And as a result, we had that separate meeting in June, sent out 720 notices to people that live directly along these alignments. The MPO got 30 responses back. You can see generally people's preference, N2 slightly higher than N1 and then N3 lower. So zooming into that canal option, just to give you a little bit of feel for what we're talking about, you can see at the top right is the canal as it is today, and the opportunity to remake it with a 12-foot multi-use trail to the side and turn it into a public amenity in addition to an infrastructure facility. As the canal goes underneath Causeway Boulevard, we have some challenges as to how we get across Causeway. One of our ideas was, let's do an overpass here, and so we put a sketch together for that and did some cost estimates and looked at it. It also helps with some of our right-of-way issues there and being able to meander it while we're up. But a lower cost option would be to go at grade. And the only challenge there is that when it goes along Causeway on this sidewalk portion here, we cannot get 12 feet in that. There is ability to do less than 12 feet in little short segments within Suntrail if you have good reason for it. The N3 alignment, which is the one that uses the power line, it has to go further east, and we end up with a right-of-way pinch point, I guess, at the intersection of Palm River and 78th. And so we looked at how we would get through there, but it's going to be very difficult, again, to get 12 feet through there without having to acquire some right-of-way. In the central corridor, both options use the utility alignments. Option C1 provides a slightly better access to Progress Village, and as a result, it's scored a little bit higher. What you can see here in this image, these were our CAD drawings. I've got a couple of these in the presentation. There are a whole bunch that were in the appendices to the report. But you can see it kind of comes through between the community facility and the recreation fields. Perfect access and an opportunity for linkages there. As we move south, we have two fairly large constraints: the Alafia River and a smaller one in Bullfrog Creek. No matter what we do, we have an Alafia River constraint unless we were to punch all the way through, and that means a new very tall bridge over the Alafia, and it was determined very early on we probably wouldn't go that route. There are plans for FDOT to replace the Alafia River Bridge as part of a PD&E where they're going to widen US 41, and that bridge would have a multi-use trail component. So in any of the alternatives we've assumed we're coming out to US 41. Then there's a difference of alignment S1 basically follows down US 41 all the way down to Sims, whereas alignment S2 would go back over to the utility corridor and cross Bullfrog Creek. Within S1, there is some discussion, and we went back and looked a little bit at the Lula Street option, which is something that had been identified years ago. It's a very small local street that also would have some right-of-way questions and concerns. At the end of the day, option S2 requires a new bridge over Bullfrog Creek, but so does S1, because you'll see at the end of the presentation, the bridge that's over Bullfrog Creek right now has a sidewalk that may be as wide as this podium, probably not even. At the end of the day, S2 scored a little bit higher. Some of the CAD renderings, again, we show the multi-use trail along the existing bridge, but this would be potentially on a new bridge, with an opportunity for a little connection loop down below that would allow you to connect the two parks as good trailheads on either side. And then where it crosses Riverview Drive with a good mid-block crossing that keeps us, in this case, away from the train tracks. We're able to do that at Riverview. In some of the other sections, we're going to be closer to the railroad tracks and bring it in together with the signal. If we do the Bullfrog Creek S2 alignment, when we're crossing the creek, well, here's what we're talking about 100 foot. Maybe the bridge span would be up to 150 feet long. And again, this would be a connection through the utility, which would bring you down to Sims Road where it already is aligning with TECO. I did fail to mention that a lot of the stuff that we're assuming here with TECO is based on work that the county's doing right now and trying to get with TECO and get an agreement for use of their corridor south, and then it would assume that it would be able to continue further north. So, in summary, the cost estimates are fairly similar. Basically, if you go with the northern alignment that follows the canal, and we do an overpass, then you're talking about $13.5 million. If you go at grade, we're about $11.5 million, so that tells you that the overpass is about $2 million. And if we went to the N3 alignment, which is the power line, it's a little bit longer of an overall trail, but the cost would come down just slightly to $11.3 million. At the end of the day, we did not do detailed analysis of N1 because Maydale Drive scored low. And the reality is, in order to get a trail through there, we would have to move the entire road for several miles to either the left or to the right and rebuild. And so that didn't carry forward. And with that, I went really quick and brief, but any questions you may have?
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Commissioner Murray, recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for this really good report. And the citizens in South County really want the South Coast Greenway Trail. And so anything we can do to help move it along as quick as possible would be great.
Well, again, the county has the PD&E study for the segment to the south. And our goal when we were finishing this is it then gets transmitted back to the county, and they do the prioritization of the next steps, which might be a PD&E for this segment.
I think it's on the tip. And so once we get these studies done, that's the problem. That's what holds it up. Yeah. It's like every section requires a study, and then that's 2 years. Then we have to get it on the tip. Then that's another couple years to get that funded. So, I mean, I don't know that we want to wait 10 years to get this trail done. So anything we can do to expedite would be very helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Murmas, second by Councilman Maniscalco. Seeing any further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving to status reports, the Tampa Bay Next Quarterly Update, FDOT. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, David Gwynn, District Secretary. I'm pleased to be here today to give you a quarterly update on the Tampa Bay Next program. I guess one of the first things I'd mention is that we have been doing a lot of public involvement, and we've been hearing a lot of things, not always the same thing from every group we talk to. But one thing we're hearing from everybody is that doing nothing is certainly not an option. We have to do something regarding our safety and congestion issues in the area. Some of it comes to us in forms of recommendations for things like you just heard, trails, other modes of transportation, transit, roads. So we are hearing a lot, and as we go forward, we're narrowing these options down to something that we can actually come and build. But today what I want to do is I want to focus primarily on two projects that we're looking more closely at as nearer term projects. One is on I-275 north of Interstate 4, the other in the area of the West Shore Interchange. But before that, I'll give you also an update on some of our other projects that are currently either under construction or procurement. Most of you know that we have the SEIS going on right now. I'll update you on the status of that, but it is going forward. We're making progress as we head towards the end of the year. We'll get into our public workshops. The Gateway Expressway, if you've been down to Pinellas County recently, you may have seen we started work down in the Pinellas Gateway area on the Gateway Express project. That project will be completed in 2021.
Basically, what it does is it adds express lanes to I-275 and also constructs 2 new elevated expressway connections between US 19 to I-275 and from the Bayside Bridge to I-275. So that is under construction, and we have about 2.5 to 3 more years before that'll be completed. The Howard Franklin Bridge, we have an industry forum this month where proposers who are interested in putting together design-build proposals to go after this project will come in and we'll tell them about our plans for the project. You all probably have seen some of the press recently about what is included and what's not included on the bridge. I will tell you that over the last year or so, we have added a number of features to the bridge to make sure that it can accommodate any future plans that may involve other modes of transportation, including things like being able to provide a portion of the bridge that will be constructed strong enough to be able to hold up to light rail should that ever become a reality in the region. It could be on that bridge. We also are making sure that if we ever decide to do a bus rapid transit system across the bridge that would require its own lane, that we would have the adequate width to do that. Our initial plans would be to look at doing that in an express lane, but there has been some concern expressed to us that what happens if the express lanes don't work and the buses are stuck in traffic. We could restripe the lane given the current RFP requirements, and we'd be able to include that as its own lane on the bus. And of course, we also added, at the request of many agencies, the bicycle and pedestrian facility that will be separated from the traffic. It won't be next to it like a bike lane. It'll be its own bridge next to it that will allow for interconnection between the 2 counties for bicycles and pedestrians. We also have 2 operational improvement projects that you'll see break ground probably starting sometime this fall on one and early next year on the other. These are not long-term improvements, but they are things that we hope will make significant improvements in the short term. One is one that we call the Punch Through Project, which basically will provide a 3rd lane in each direction on I-275 as you come off or going to the Howard Franklin Bridge on the Hillsborough County side, where there's currently 2 lanes in each direction. The 3rd lane will provide that additional capacity. We're also going to be significantly lengthening the merge area for the loop ramp traffic. If you've come from the airport to go northbound on 275, you get in that loop ramp and you'll notice you have to merge over right away. There's not a whole lot of room. That's a major congestion point as well as a crash history problem. We're going to extend that about 1 mile to the north, and so that should hopefully allow for a much smoother weave and merge. And those 2 projects, I think, will provide a lot of, I guess, near-term relief as we wait for the longer-term projects. Wanted to talk briefly about the I-275 North Corridor, and I'm sure you all know that within the last year or so, we decided that we were going to remove express lanes from consideration in that segment. And we did that for a couple reasons. One was the community made some good arguments about the impacts that we would be having, and especially the right-of-way impacts and how that would impact the community. And also we looked at the potential of using I-75 as express lane corridor to go north-south as opposed to using this portion of I-275. And so that was something that we agreed to, but we also looked at the downtown interchange and said, can we reduce some of the impacts there? We've reduced the right-of-way down in that area, and depending on the option chosen, we could see a significantly reduced right-of-way compared to what it was in the previous Tampa Bay Express projects. But that doesn't remove the fact that we've got a huge problem on the segment of I-275 north of I-4. This graph is what they call a heat map. It shows the frequency of crashes in a certain area, and if you look at that, the red is where the really bad areas are. And you can see that there's 2 areas that really stick out in the region. One of them is I-275 north of Interstate 4, and the other is down in the West Shore interchange. And just some of the numbers that you'll see in there are pretty significant. In 2016 alone, there was about 1,000 crashes in the area of the West Shore interchange, and there were over 1,500 on the segment of I-275 up in that area around I-4. So we want to do something. We have to do something to try to improve that. They are also included in the MPO's plans for areas that we did look to for safety. So what are we looking at? We are investigating a project
that would all be within the existing right-of-way. So again, there's no need for any additional right-of-way in this area. But the project we're evaluating now would allow us to address safety and congestion along the corridor by adding a non-tolled general purpose lane within the existing right-of-way. Not everywhere, but in areas that we needed to help to move traffic and reduce conflict points, similar to the one that you see coming southbound on 275 to go to I-4. We also are going to use this opportunity to enhance pedestrian and bicycle connections. We're going to look to improve some of the interchanges that have operational problems and also provide opportunities for transit, and all, again, within the existing right-of-way. One of the things we continually hear is that getting underneath the interstate in this area is not a fun thing to do. It's not aesthetically pleasing, it's not safe in some areas for many people, and they want us to look at improvements. So some of the things we're going to look to do as part of this project is to widen our sidewalks through that area, enhance lighting, do things like painting the bridge substructure to make it more aesthetically pleasing. As you probably see in a lot of those places, we have the sloped walls that come down to hold up the bridge. We're looking at cutting those back to make them straight up and down so that we can fit more room underneath there to do things like bicycle paths and pedestrian paths. We're open to doing things like public art. That's something that folks have asked us to look at. And also look at landscaping. That's all stuff that we can do within this project. And the other thing we can do with this project is complete the sound walls through the corridor. This will allow us to go into the areas that don't currently have sound walls and put them in, work with the community to make them as aesthetically pleasing as we can, getting them involved in the design of it, where it would go, how it would look. All of that would hopefully be something that the community would see as an asset. We're also looking to make sure that everybody that's been involved so far in the Tampa Bay Next process is going to continue to be involved in this next phase, which would be a more of an operational improvement, but something that we would do to improve near-term conditions as much as we possibly can within the existing right-of-way. Of course, landscape opportunities, there's lots of opportunities that we can do on that. We build landscaping into our projects, so we would do that in this area. Now, the West Shore interchange, many of you know that at one time a portion of this interchange, or a large portion of this interchange, was funded in the work program. And when we re-entered the SEIS, we had that most of that money removed. And so we're now looking for ways, as the SEIS comes to fruition, to bring that project back into the work program. The West Shore interchange area, as opposed to the downtown interchange area, has always seemed to have a lot more support and is less controversial. We own most of the right-of-way already. There's a few pockets that we would have to buy. But this project that we're talking about would provide a lot of things that are going to be badly needed, especially after Gateway and Howard Franklin are completed. It would provide direct express lane connection to the Tampa International Airport, also have a dedicated ramp from Kennedy Boulevard to the airport. It would connect to the veterans. It provides a lot of connections that really are at the hub of this whole system. So that's the project that we're really hoping to try to get money for. That's CIS money that's programmed at the central office statewide level. So we're making our case to try to get that, and we're hopeful the community is going to be supportive of that. Of course, as part of that also, we've received a lot of input about local connections and aesthetics. How do we reconnect some of the roads, take the traffic off of some of the roads that are currently over capacity, distribute it out more? And so we're looking at a number of things. Occident Street, Rio Street, Trask Street would all be connected or reconnected under I-275. We'll also be creating additional north-south corridors to move some traffic in that area. And then we also are looking to do a high level of aesthetic treatment for that area. So where are we in the process? Right now, we're in the period between when we did our first public workshop and when we do our second public workshop. And that's where we prepare the majority of our documents that have to go to Federal Highway for their review and ultimately, hopefully, approval of an SEIS. So we're going through that in December. We'll go out to the public with what we have as far as those documents and the recommendations to go forward. And then as we go past that workshop, we'll go into next summer where we'll have the public hearing. And at that point, hopefully the SEIS will be completed and we'll know what direction that we're taking. We do have a lot of upcoming outreach meetings. They're probably, many of you see them all throughout your areas. We continue to do that. We will have 2 SEIS public workshops. The first one will be December 10th. The second one will be December 13th. Our next update to you will be prior to those workshops. I don't want to end before the presentation before I take a minute to mention transit. And I know Ming Gao is scheduled to talk to the committees as well as to the board soon on our multimodal center study, as well as a number of the other transit initiatives that we're funding the studies for. So I'm not going to talk in a lot of details, but I did want to just reiterate again, FDOT stands ready to be a partner with you on transit. We are have shown, I think, a willingness to provide the funding where we can, to do the studies, to look for opportunities, to do things like making the streetcar free for a period of time to try to see if we can get ridership up on that. Commissioner Kemp and I went over and had a nice tour of the Sunrail facilities and got to see some of the things that are going on in that corridor. And so we're here, but the thing I would just, again, to reiterate, we want to work with you on transit, but the first step is having a viable plan and a clear indication from the local community about what transit projects they'd like to pursue. But we are stand ready to partner with you on those. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Councilman McCoy, you recognize.
Thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you so much for all of the public outreach that you've done related to this project, and particularly for the amount of time I know that you spent with some of us as individuals dealing with problems that come up and being really responsive on behalf of FDOT. We have had some issues in downtown Tampa recently, and you personally got involved in them, and it was extremely helpful. I was very gratified to see that you were concentrating a lot in your presentation on aesthetics and about the way that things look and affect the community, the way that these interchanges are designed to reduce some of their impacts. But I have to say I'm concerned and a little bit disappointed in the slide that depicted the new Howard Franklin Bridge. I think that we are spending almost 900. What was the? I don't know if you can get back to that slide or not.
Yeah, I can.
814 million.
$814 million on the bridge, and if you look at the depiction of it in right there, it basically looks as though it's just going to be a concrete slab across the bay, and I think we are really missing an opportunity here to build into this a concern for what this bridge looks like. This is going to be the structure that connects Hillsborough and Pinellas County, Tampa and St. Petersburg. It is our opportunity to have something in this community that we can be proud of, not just because it moves people. And by the way, I'm thrilled that you added the pedestrian and bike lanes. I think that was a major improvement to this project. But I really want to reiterate what I've said before and appeal to everyone to make what this bridge looks like a part of the project. You guys have done beautiful work on some of the interchanges that have been redone recently. The Dale Mabry I-275 piece, the piece in West Tampa that has the red brick veneers. I mean, I think that these are really innovative and creative designs. And I really hope that this bridge will follow suit, that we'll be able to find a way to do something to make this the iconic structure that it really could be, whether it's balustrades or minarets or something that evokes the spirit of the region. I think that spending this much money, that's something we ought to be able to expect out of a project like this. So before all of this is released, I just wanted to, I see contract letting on October 15th. If it's not a part of the contract to have it look a certain way, it may fall through the cracks. And I think it's a really, really important opportunity to get this right and make it something we can all be proud of.
No, and I understand your concern, and this is really just a
is a very generic drawing of a bridge. This is going out as a design-build proposal. So we'll have teams that will propose different designs to us. And part of that they'll have points in there and all for is the aesthetics of the bridge. The one thing we're trying to make sure, though, is that, we already have one bridge that's going to stay. And so we don't want necessarily to have one bridge that looks completely different than the other bridge. But there may be things we can do to both bridges to try to make them look better. That'll certainly be part of the
Well, no,
conversation.
I'm sure that a competent firm will be able to integrate what the old
Yes.
bridge looks like with something new. But I'm glad to know that there are going to be points assigned for that, because I think it's a really important criteria of this.
That'll be part of the grading criteria.
Commissioner White, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines with the Howard Franklin Bridge, I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can for the ecological health of Tampa Bay. I sit on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board. Councilman Maniscalco sits on that board with me, so I think he would agree when I say that, I just want to make sure that as this bridge concept is designed, that we seek to improve the flow into that area of the bay and have it restored to its natural flow to the greatest extent possible. It would make my day if FDOT would do two things, if you haven't already done so. One would be to talk with Ed Sherwood, the executive director of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. I know that he has some ideas that he would like to share with respect to design on the new bridge. You may or may not be able to implement everything that he suggests, but I think he can bring some great ideas to the table. The second thing that would make my day is that if you would talk to EPC staff, I know Commissioner Miller is the chairman of EPC, to see if there are any opportunities to use demolition materials for EPC's artificial reef program. I know those are a couple things I brought up in the past, but
Right.
it would absolutely make my day if FDOT could work on those two things.
We'd be glad to, I would be surprised if we haven't already spoken, regarding the estuary. In fact, we funded a study to look at that specifically, because one of the thoughts was, should we look at doing an additional bridge over in the causeway area to open that up to additional flow?
Yep.
Similar to what we did on Courtney Campbell. The challenge we're running into is based on the modeling we're finding on Courtney Campbell. We saw about a 60 to 70% improvement in the nitrogen levels and the water quality in that area. What we're seeing down in the area at the end of the Pinellas end of the Howard Franklin is more like a 7% improvement, and at a cost of maybe $200 million. And so we're looking to see how or if that's the best way to do it, but we are certainly working with everybody, and what to do with the debris from the old bridge is going to be a part of the puzzle that we're doing. We're talking, I know we've talked to folks at the port, we've talked to other folks, the reef program, so yeah, we'll look to see what the best we can do with all that.
Yeah, the Hillsborough EPC definitely has an artificial reef program. The 7 Hillsborough County Commissioners sit as the EPC board, so I think, they would be a great group to engage.
Mr. Lopado, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to compliment the Secretary on his willingness to change plans as he sees community input and other ideas that might be better. But a couple of things I want to say as the airport director, just report to you all that we're seeing tremendous growth in our passenger numbers. We now announced a new flight to Amsterdam starting next year. So the express lanes coming into the airport is awesome. It's great. We have to solve the problem of we're bringing lots of travelers here from all around the world, and then they want to go somewhere and they have to have a good experience, otherwise they won't come back. So compliment you on that. Great engagement. We meet every quarter with the Secretary, and we really understand how the airport fits into the overall system. Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
I want to thank you, Secretary Gwynn, I think you brought a whole new attitude and fresh air to FDOT, and I really appreciate so much being able to meet with you, work with you, and I think the kinds of community engagement and not only have you listened, but you've heard and incorporated into the plan. I think so many things that the community has been saying and moving forward, working on this. I have phase 2 of the things that I want. And first of all, I want to thank you too for accompanying me out to Sunrail. I hope to open it up and get all the elected officials in the region out there. Bring Sunrail in here for a presentation. I think we're missing an opportunity for a relatively low cost dedicated corridor in our community that could be amazing and serve this area better than any other area in Florida. And why we wouldn't be focusing on that, I don't know. But I intend to try and bring it to the floor, and I thank you. That was a wonderful trip out to see Sunrail. In terms of this, I've always been about minimizing the corridors and looking at ways to, work to not take as much of the downtown interchange. I know that with a lot of people focus on West Shore interchange. I don't think we have as much, we're not paying as much attention, or not much as input seems to be going up in terms of the downtown interchange. I think one of the things you've done, which makes it so good, is when you did the bridge, we can actually see the lanes. makes a difference from 2 years ago when people weren't even understanding what the lanes were. So when I'm looking at shrinking the size of the downtown interchange, or at least looking at the footprint and keeping it the size it is, I'm thinking in every way that way. I'm really pleased that we are no longer bringing express lanes down 275 north of downtown, because I felt like that was going to blow up the whole interchange, have what I call, there's maybe other ways people define it, but a dual infrastructure of just more of a tangle of roads and confusion and mess, and not really solving the problem, but exacerbating it. When I look around at I-4, as it comes I-4 east of downtown, we all know that there's a big gash or opening in the middle of it going out to Orlando. I understand the Bright Line and possibly others will be doing, there's an RFP put out on that. There'll be bids that come in the day after Election Day in November. And so I guess that will be coming forward. I know as far as Bright Line goes, it seems that most of their interest is in looking at putting their station to the east side of downtown because of the extensive cost of bringing it through the downtown interchange. So again, there I'm looking and saying, wow, there's another lane we don't have to provide, another space that we don't have to provide through the downtown interchange for that transit coming from Orlando. So what we're looking at now, I assume, is 2 express lanes each direction coming over from Orlando through to West Shore and the bridge when we look at the downtown interchange. And what I'm interested in seeing is that one of those express lanes gets connected to the connector, the Leroy Salmon connector, so that we could bring it through south of downtown and have connections to Tampa and onto going west on the Leroy Salmon, on Gandy, and into St. Pete for a more direct connection and use of that, use of the Leroy Salmon, and not have to build infrastructure and that second lane north or south. Well, I won't talk about or east or west, but that's coming from the east and avoiding putting northern connections, infrastructure into our downtown. I'd like to see what we can do to think about doing that, and again, minimizing the downtown interchange. I mentioned earlier that I was concerned, and I know it's preliminary and we're looking at it, but in terms of north, as being one of the places where we have drop off, have a exit, a connection there. And I'm wondering about Laurel Street and how we can use that just south of the expressway. It seems like a much more suitable street. I would not like to see expressway traffic dropping on to North, and I'm very concerned about that because I think that's one of our very walkable, community-oriented and streets, and I don't want to see it have those kinds of impacts. So as we go forward, I'm looking at that. Also, in terms of the bridge, if these are turned into, which I assume that they will eventually be, toll lanes, that we start to look at hot lanes and what we can do about multiple use vehicles or people that are using those, for high occupancy vehicles. And if we can start to reduce tolls or eliminate tolls for those kinds of uses to encourage them in the HOV or in the toll lanes.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Resilient Tampa Bay.
Good morning, Allison Ye, MPO staff. I have a very brief, that's the wrong direction. That is still the wrong direction. Down.
Oh, down.
Okay, all right. Back in the spring, we reported to the board that the Hillsborough MPO, the Pasco MPO, and the Pinellas MPO, along with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, had received a grant from the Federal Highway Administration to look at resiliency and durability of the transportation system to extreme weather. So we kicked off that project officially this month, and just giving you a quick briefing, and there'll be future briefings as we proceed in the project. We're one of 11 projects throughout the country. They range from DOTs to MPOs to regional councils to including the Naval Engineering Facility Command, looking at mainly for us flooding due to extreme weather. And the reason we're doing this right now is you've been hearing a lot about our LRTP update for the 2045, and one of the federal requirements in the FAST Act is that we do look at resiliency and reliability of the transportation system and how to mitigate stormwater impacts for surface transportation. So the data is gonna go right along and be fed into the LRTP. Just a little background, I think you probably know this better than me. 2.8 million people, another million anticipated in the Tampa Bay region by 2045, 1,000 miles of shoreline with 39% of that in flood zones. And I'm not even counting the barrier islands. So what the whole region is looking to do is, as we update our LRTPs, we're going to incorporate that into the LRTP. And we're also working pretty closely with hazard mitigation and emergency and public works to see if we can put that information into the hazard mitigation plans as well. I want you to know that as we start this process, we officially kicked off at the beginning of August, that we're not working in a vacuum. We are coordinating with the Regional Planning Council. We're coordinating local governments. For example, in Hillsborough County, the county is doing a peril floods matrix, and we're coordinating with the USF, Dr. Bond at USF, to work on that. We're feeding this information directly into their report as they need it. And very simply, that's what's going on. We'll be back to you in the future with more updates on this project. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Ms. Clarendon, Executive Director's report.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you, Chairman Miller. Very briefly, there is a Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group meeting coming right up this Friday, September 7th at 9:30 a.m. Up at the Florida DOT District 7 offices. Those meetings are open to the public. I would like to just give you a brief update on the outreach we're doing on the interactive survey called It's Time Tampa Bay. We launched that at the end of July, 1st of August, and so far we've had responses from over 5,600 folks throughout the three-county area, Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough County. We have started to look at where those responses are coming from and where we're a little shy or light on participation. We're redoubling our efforts to get input from those areas. And then last but not least, Your next board meeting is October 2nd with a presentation from the Smart Cities Project and Integrated Corridor Management. And then last day of October, in lieu of a November meeting, you will have a meeting on October 31st. And we hope to get somebody over here to talk about the Bright Line rail project to connect to over to Orlando. So that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to bring this up, but since you brought up about the It's Time Tampa Bay, I've gotten several calls from constituents about the flyers that went in the trim notices. It's not the flyer I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about giving away free tickets if you do the survey.
Free tickets or what?
There is a drawing for a pair of Bucks versus Saints tickets, 5 drawings for a pair of Lightning tickets. I don't know that this is legal. I just would like our attorney to check this out because, number one, you're using a public, what I want to call it, delivery system to send these out, which is not the problem, but it's just the idea that we're offering free tickets if you take the survey. And I'm not sure. I know for us as elected officials, we can't take anything like that for free. So, and in the future, I guess I would like to ask that when they do things like this in the future, that come to this board and it be vetted by the board. That's all.
Okay.
You want to see it? It was in the trim notice. It's also in they're all over the building. It's not the issue of the flyer. It's the issue of the free tickets. I want to make sure that we're operating within the guidelines of legality, since many of us sit on this board as public officials.
Did you want to report back from our counsel, general counsel, legal counsel?
I think, yes, I'd like our I don't know that he's here.
He's here.
Oh, there you are. He could just report back to us, make sure.
Mr. LaPalma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to report to the board that I had a chance to ride on the Bright Line train down from Miami to Fort Lauderdale and back. And if you get a chance to get down there and check it out, it's really awesome. The train stations are absolutely beautiful. They're almost as good looking as Tampa International Airport.
Almost?
Almost. But I encourage you to go try it out. It's really an awesome train. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any old business? Commissioner McKemp, you recognize.
Thank you. 2 months ago, I made a motion, and this board approved it, to have the market study brought to us. And we still haven't had that, which I've thought is a predicate for our regional transit plan, and hasn't been presented to any transit board or any transportation board that I've been on. And we did pay, or at least FDOT paid $1.5 million to have that be a part of the study. So I'm concerned that we haven't had that presented. I'd like to make sure that we have that on the agenda and be presented next month.
Any other old business? Any new business? Seeing none, we adjourn.